life and death were simple things. One, the other, then, the life beyond in ether. But the spirit fades, death comes again. By fading light, new life it brings. Life and death, and life and death, repeated all through time. An endless cycle of rebirth. The spirit falls and climbs, and lives and dies its life and death. The yellow and the gray, the two were said to be the key to life and death, and life and death. And now they are, you see, why I survive in spite of you. How simple life and death were. How easy to accept. No tears to shed for tragedy, no mind for earthly debt. How glorious it seemed to be to die and be reborn. How fruitless seemed this mortal life. How foolish then to mourn. The ether calls each human who yet walks upon the earth, or so the leaders of the cult had taught their kin from birth. You cannot see, but it sees you. But still the blessings of the earth were free to love and keep, though only with the knowledge that we cannot love too deep, that which has no heavenly worth. And so I loved you, by and by you loved, though I knew both one day would die, to live again above. The ether called, but by and by we loved. Perhaps our hearts would carry on, perhaps love could survive. When dead our vessels all become, the soul remains alive. Until it fades, until we're gone. We worship death, my folk and me, as earth and ether's portal, so I asked you there to die with me. When one would go, then so the other, and in death we'd go together. But one word spoke, it broke the tether. You claimed to be immortal. Could you know the pain it brought, to only then fear death? To know that ancient I could die and you would still draw breath, that you would live while I would rot. Awaiting death my life was lived and worshipping the end, but now the earth held something dear that I could not attend, and death did only now misgive. Did madness take me? This I ask in solemn retrospect. I'm not too mad behind the mask to honestly reflect. So mad from every grievous task that I should now forget what reason and what pathos are. But no, I and gray and yellow, clarity and purpose, reason, back before these 100 seasons, even now, I know this yet, these my grand works did beget. These things, these works, I can't forget. Within the scriptures of the cult, the key was surely kept, and life and death and life and death I studied, never slept, and life and death and life and death I searched, and failed, and wept. And then, an ancient record, after many days and nights, revealed, I thought, the secret truth of life and death and life. I read the hidden story after many nights and days, and this I thought was it. I'd seek the yellow and the gray. Death and death again, The gods put it in place. This cycle was to be a blessing, eternal life, by grace of the Almighty, to dead men. But ashes into ashes was no grace to lands of men. To watch our lovers die, and to bury our brethren. And yet, the mortal world, it does. So did I dare defy the law of man, God, and occult. I dared. I clasped the answer, and was cast out as a result. For my creed now showed a flaw. Yes, the shepherd worshipped death, but now his sheep did not. And angry grew the shepherd as the sheep escaped the plot. I gave him what he worshipped when he tried to take the key. Though I was seeking life, his death was not the last for me. Long and far I traveled, and I sought with every step. And I fought and clawed and trusted that the love I'd left had kept as I roved upon the land. And soon I found what I had sought, a continent away, the power that the gods had left, the yellow and the gray. What they'd feared, I'd use, I thought. The Lord had hubris in her soul, and knew that it was so. So life and death she cast aside her power over both, and now that power was my own. Then from that continent I trekked to rediscover home. Discovered that you loved me still. Discovered you alone. Discovered that my deeds before had been discovered too. The trial found me not guilty, yet the people round us knew. They saw in me a monster. They saw in me a beast. Their suspicion I survived, for you suspected not the least. You trusted in my goodness. You trusted in my love. You trusted the intentions which I told you nothing of. My motives were a mystery, and still I had your faith. I swore I would repay your trust. But looking back, this wraith remains dissatisfied with history. In the darkness of our home, beneath the wooden floor, I emptied out the earth and closed it up to form the door of the sanctum, which was mine alone. Life and death, and life and death, and life and death, and life and death, bodies, pieces, hearts and souls, and brains and minds and breath, earth and ether, flesh and bone and spirit thus evoked. My body and the ones which I had borrowed to be broke became the sort of matter most would think best left unspoke. And when at last I did emerge and let you finally see this not entirely human thing they saw as blasphemy was something it had never been before, immortal one could say, although that immortality meant quite a heavy price to pay for the labor and the pain, and the blood from all the slain, never washing from my conscience, never leaving from my brain. Still I'd done it, this I knew, walking out into the day, though imperfect, still immortal, by the yellow and the gray. So they found me, and they took me. And even under your protest, a second trial for a second crime, and many others yet, found its way to finding me guilty, 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 guilty. So they found me, And they took me, and they bound me. All my sins required punishments, so said the sheep and cows. But the power that I had become would never leave me now. So they took creative recompense. They tied my arms behind my back, tethering with twine and bands, and hexed my very spirit with eternal cursed remand, arms of body and of spirit bound forever, neck to hand. So even if the twines that held should ever be removed, my spirit too was bound. My arms and hands I'd never use, no blasphemies would I commit, not one more useless man they'd lose. And with that, I was thus expelled. I leaned into your shoulder. You embraced my ruined form, embraced the limbs that had been wrung, the flesh that had been torn. You loved me, even as a beast, and not for what I'd done, not for the tortures I'd endured, or what I had become. You loved me as you always had, for who I was, not what. And yet, the yellow and the gray, it twisted in my gut. It burned inside my lungs, it swelled within my eyes, it seethed, cried for revenge, for death. Secretly, I obliged. My arms were taken, this was true, but this was not an issue to this yellow and gray corruption in me. I had somehow fathered through this pain and labor, blood and bone and skin and death and blight. And now this bitter, angry, ruinous, desperate, frightened thing would bite. My arms were taken, but 3 tails of grey and black it grew for me, and my immortal form survived the other things it did to me, and my most beastly form survived the killers people sent for me. And slowly, I think I forgot the love that you had given me. I think that I regret forgetting that faith you had given me. At least I did. Back then, before the need for blood took over me. But that is when I found the Lord unknowingly had laid a trap for me, or someone else whose pious sense had swayed. No blasphemy could she afford. A coming darkness she'd foreseen, and that, it seems, was me. And so the gods chose paladins. No army, only 3. Immortal, righteous, dumb, and blind, and on the earth they'd always been. The willing pawns of trembling gods, assembled all at last to challenge my power and the curses I'd amassed. And in more than one way were at odds, for there I was, and there you were. Your white and gleaming eyes, your sister's lashing tail, your brother's squeaking joints, immortal creatures just like me the gods sent to assail, whom the heavens did anoint. But even as we stood there, one a demon, one a saint, you only saw a lover, fighting still against restraints. But the yellow still demanded that I live another day, and it was demanded of me that I slay them by the gray. So I killed your siblings even as they charged to do me in. I watched you watch me, helpless as I tore them limb from limb. Pain and suffering, blood and bone and skin and death and blight. This bitter, angry, ruinous, desperate, frightened thing did bite. I'd risen from mortality to find eternal life, and to share it with the world that now pursued untimely death. So death I brought upon them, brought their blood upon the ground, brought my wrath against their flesh, until that flesh laid all around. I'd split and sundered every man who dared to stand opposed. Your sister and your brother, like the rest, were both disposed from their rank on high beside the gods, were violently deposed. Then lastly, I embraced you with the things that passed for hands. I cradled you against me, standing on the bloodied land. I only asked that you remain my lover by and by. And by and by, you found your chance and fled before my eyes. I curdled there in sorrow and in hatred. Yes, it's true, for even as I loved you, I could not help hating you. I loved you, and I hated you, and I wished for you to die. I loved you, and I hated you, and wished for us to die. Far from what I could have seen, you found the one who knew a way you might have ended me. Once 3, now there were 2. With hundreds dead, it fell to you to kill the thing that shouldn't be. You soothed me when you found me, but it was just a bait. The moment I forgave you, you closed up the prison's gate. Now it was you who'd bound me. And even as you cried for me, you put me underground, alive and well, but not for long in that ethereal shell. In that white shell you buried me, and closed the earth up around me. And like the others, you bound me. My body slept and atrophied, as I assume you'd wished. It died inside of several days, and left my ghostly mist. And if I were a human, then that mist would too have died. But if the gods told you you'd won, I'm sorry, love. They lied. No, locked away 6,000 nights, and locked away 6,000 days, I still survived. The yellow and gray sustained me with its godly might. The power over death, you see, and power over life left me among the living long after you sheathed the knife. This weakened shell will shatter soon, and then I will return for you, and there is nothing you can do. You can't see me, but I see you. I've watched the world, listened to, been locked away and hidden too, long since betrayed and lost to you. But all of it will start anew, and there'll be nothing you can do. I burn and swell and call to you, so tell your gods the worst's come true. The bound shall be returning soon. The shepherd knew it all along. Death to everything must come. If I should hurry it, am I wrong? I sought for life when I was young, but now I am death. everything. For so I am bound.